how did it happen? And let's start at the beginning.
First of all, I'm so pleased to be here tonight, and as I look out and see so many friends who have been essential to my life over the last 30 to 40 years. I look at San Michelle, who was a librarian at Rhodes University in 1974 when I first came to the Eastern Cape. I've got a Lesotho contingent from my days there, so Roger and May. I hope I'm not missing anybody from that phase, from the mid-1980s. Tops Ruma, who was a student at UCT, and still credits me with.
Yeah, you mean that I went back to school.
But from Cape Town, actually it may have been earlier than the mid-80s, I think it was. Matthews and Piki Posa, have been friends since the mid-80s, and have become really a very strong part of our family. Sorry, okay. I see Ann Megger back there, who was a colleague at UCT at one point, but we've known each other for many years. Charles and Eileen Villavicencio. And then, of course, Andre, who I've known for ages, and his wife Zora, and my godson Adam. So I may be missing other people out there, Les Bank from East London. So I'm really appreciative of all the people who have come out. Omar Bacha, who's been my muse for popular history in South Africa. This story with AP starts actually in the late 70s. I was banned from re-entering South Africa in 1976. Not for things I did here, but for things back in the U.S. And I shifted my attention to Lesotho. Picked up a copy of Edward Rue's Time Longer Than Rope. That is still a valuable book, and it gave me an idea for a project to do there. So I started going to Lesotho, taught at the University of Lesotho in the mid-80s, but there were all sorts of very interesting South African exiles living in Lesotho. One of them was Edwin Mfutsanyana, another was A.P Mda. And so around 1983, I approached A.P. With the idea of doing interviews with him, because aside from an interview done in 1970, he had really stayed away from talking to people. And he made a proposition to me. He said, look, I'll agree to talk to you, but you can only record my story on a tape recorder up to the age of 21. And he said, I don't want you to record me about anything in my political life, because I don't know what's going to happen to your tapes. And I don't want them played back to me in a trial if they come and grab me from back in South Africa. So I've got some wonderful tapes of him for his early life and up to the age of 21. And then I had to take notes. Now, Luyanda will probably remember this better than me, but AP used to hang out at a tea room run by Chris Honey's father in Mafeking, Gilbert Honey. Elizabeth Mafeking, who was a prominent trade union, was working in the cafe also, and we used to go there to get tea. And I think you were there one day, and I agreed to give him a lift back to Maseru, and he can take it from there.
Thanks, Bob. I also would like to acknowledge a few people around around today. First, I must acknowledge my teacher, Anne. Anne was my lecturer at UCT when I did an honors degree there in the 90s. And she tells me now she's retired. I thought she was still a young woman. And many other people I've met. Actually, most of you I met through Bob. I think Bob's house has become this hub for all of us South Africans in the US. I mean, I met Andrew there, I met Charles, I met Omar, I met Bratops, and a very interesting story. Bratops, we stayed in the room where I used to live in Bob's house, and on this particular day, can I just digress a little bit? On this particular day, he came with his family to visit. I said, no, you can actually sleep in my room downstairs. I went out to go and sleep with friends. And I'd forgotten to notify them that there's a funny animal in this room. And at night came crawling this big rat, big one, like this. Americans make big things. And they make big rats too.
It's an opossum.
Neither of us knew what it was, And you can imagine the stories. I said, hey, man, what did you bring from Africa? Did you bring that animal? And when we finally caught it, Bob said, no, this is an opossum. It's a big rat. Big rat. But there's this fond memories of all these people. And May, who turned their home to our home in Lesotho, with all of us there. She also had beautiful girls. I think that was the main attraction for all of us to hang around there. But it's been really, really a wonderful thing. I met Andre also at Bob's house. But, the first time I heard about, I met A.P in 1978. And I had been sent by his daughter to go and talk to the father because of something that had actually happened. And the father was a little she's off, that she had the audacity to go and tell her that, it's something personal, really. But then A.P just became interested in me. He asked me, who am I? Where did I come? Where do I come from? Then I told him I come from Kigulemstown. Did I know Steve Biko? He wanted to know more about the student uprising. I was part of that in 1976. And from that meeting, he asked me to come back the following weekend, and the next weekend, and the next weekend. And he was listening to me talking about this. What I said, I don't know what fascinated this old man. I was actually getting worried. What should I say to him? Because I thought I told him everything. And then one day he turned around and said, the more you talk about this young Biko, the more you remind me of my friend called Lembede. And I thought he was making a mistake. He wanted to say Lumumba. I said, Lembede. I never heard of Lembede. And he spoke to me about Lembede for over 8 years. He spoke to me about Lembede to a point where I began to know who Lembede was. I could actually hear his voice, I could hear him talk, I could hear him walk, because A.P was about Lembede every day. And at about that time, I left for England. And while I was in England, in Oxford, as Edgar said, I was a student at a technical college just outside Oxford. I was close to Colin. Colin told me that, Luyanda, there's this guy, Bob Edgar, who is interested in A.P. I said, wow. And he wants to write about A.P. So I'm sure you'll meet him when you go to Lesotho. So when I met Bob in Lesotho, it confirmed what Colin Bade told me about Bob. And this relationship with Bob has been very, very problematic. Bob and his ways of doing things. You won't believe it. One day he takes me to Joburg with Edwin Fusanyana. And I sleep with Edwin Fusanyana in this little room. And this old man falls sick. And he's almost dying. And I'm like, what do you do when a communist die? Do you pray? But it was a very interesting one. I mean, actually, he was at that point where he was really almost giving up, But he woke up the following day and he gave a brilliant talk at the COSATU meeting. But it was a very, very scary moment being with this old man in the room. And actually, what do I say to people? Why does he die when he's with me in the room? But that's the long and short of our own introduction. But getting back to sorry, Andrew, a little bit too. Getting back to the Mafeking community, it's a small community in Lesotho. It's a small community, predominantly Basotho, of course. But this group of South Africans, amongst them was Gilbert Hani, it was A.P Mda with his family, and it was Elizabeth Mafeking with her family. And Chris used to come home every Sunday to come in with his father. So almost every weekend on my way back to Maseru, Chris would actually give me a lift, and we actually get talking. So we got to know each other quite well, from that experience. And it was a very, very small place. You got to know each other, a lot of support for each other. And the beauty about Lesotho is that I think we transcended some of the political differences. I think people were able to interact with each other at an ideological level. And I'm really proud to say that some of the bonds that were formed have been able to sustain us to this day. That's it.
Andre, can I just add a quick thing? I remember that incident with old Msumza, who was close to 90 when it happened, and he had these, it was like a heart attack, but he wakes up the next morning, he says, "Yeah, this has been happening to me for 50 years. Don't worry about it." But the other name was Joe Moklahelwa, who was also in Mafeking. But it was interesting, that community got along very well with each other. And the one thing I regret about that is I tried to get Elizabeth Mafeking to do some interviews with me, and she just was very reticent. So that was one of my failures in terms of drawing out people. And now I wish I had been able to do that. Andre?
Yeah, 4 weekends in a row, and then it carried on for 8 years. So tell us a bit about what you spoke about and what he was like as a person.
A.P is very interesting. Perhaps I'll talk some features of this man. I mean, I think Bob has written extensively about him, and I fully concur with what Bob has actually said about A.P. But A.P has been this dynamic young man who has grown. He grew from the Catholic Church. He outgrew the Catholic Church. He moved into the political movement, and he was actually very instrumental in the unity attempts between the All African Convention and the ANC. He worked, with the whole spectrum of political organization, political personalities those days, from Msumza himself to with other characters those days. But he worked with a lot of people, within the broad spectrum of the ANC. He was highly, highly regarded by the leadership of the ANC. A.P used to tell me the stories. He would talk about the stories. A.P could talk. Bob has this ability. I mean, I'm a young man. I'm in my 20s. Actually, I was 20 when I met this guy, and he would say to me, "Look, we're going to have a conference," and I'm like, "Oh, well, we're going to get the other people, 2 of us, a 3 weeks conference, and it's staggered over 3 weekends." And it starts this time, it goes this time, and we're going to cover this period to that period. and AP would go exhaustively through this history. I mean, I would be so tired, I would want to sleep, and AP will just continue talking. And I'd be embarrassed, I'd wake up, you know. He had a real depth of commitment to imparting this history with me. At some point, I really thought, no, some of these things were not completely real. I mean, the way he's